trying to inspire young musicians today and kind of get some history out of you as well, some generic questions as well. What thoughts, feelings, or events inspired you to want to go from being a music listener to a musician?
In my particular case, I can't really answer that because I was playing music from the time I was like 2 or 3. I was in piano lessons really young. I was singing with my mom really young. I think I turned more into a music listener after being a player for a few years. Like, you know, when I was probably in like elementary school and like I had, you know, the Vanilla Ice poster on my wall and I had Ace of Base CD in my CD player and I rollerblade in my basement in Chicago, you know what I mean? I wasn't really a music listener then. That was just kind of whatever was available to my 3rd or 4th grade.
Pop culture.
Right, you know. So when I hit maybe, you know, I think I was about 11. At this point, I'd been playing classical and jazz piano for, you know, almost 10 years, and I'd done recitals and performances, and we performed in choirs and whatnot. But then my sister came home with Stone Temple Pilots' Core and Dr. Dre's The Chronic, and I stole those motherfuckers, and I listened to them nonstop.
Sure.
And that's what got me kind of into what still exists today as far as my listening choices is anything from like hard rock to metal to extreme metal and like the hip hop stuff that I'm totally into. So I think I really became a listener consciously later, you know.
In a sense, you were almost like creatively indoctrinated into music. It's kind of like, but when did that turn from this is just a hobby that I'm doing to now this is what drives my heart? When did it turn to passion?
When I was like 11 or so, in 6th grade, my buddy Justin, his brother Ben, had a band. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Sure. And that's when I started learning, like I remember the first song I learned on guitar was Come As You Are by Nirvana. And then I learned Smells Like Teen Spirit. And then I started learning other stuff. And I started a band. And I had a band for a couple of years. And we played shows and stuff in the suburbs of Chicago. I also have a love for martial arts, and I'd gotten my black belt in Hapkido, and then I'd met my, as of now, my Kung Fu teacher, who lived in California. And at one point, I was about 17, and the band I was in had broken up, and I was kind of disillusioned with the whole thing, and I moved to California to go study Kung Fu, and that was going to be my life path. I was done being in bands. I was still going to play music. Mm-hmm. I took my guitar with me and whatever, but being like a performer was off the radar at that point. And I lived in Ventura with my Sifu, and I trained, you know, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day or whatever, and that was my path. And extraneous circumstances happened, and my bank account got hacked, and I lost all my money, and I had to go home to Chicago. And some other things happened where I got stuck in Chicago for 1.5 years. And I went out to see a show with a buddy of mine, and I went and watched this band Dominion, which had Kyle Mayer in it, had Brian Wolf in it. Mm-hmm. And my other buddies, Sean, Chris, and Tim. And I went as a fan, just to see my pals perform, you know. And I remember being front row, and the singer at the time, Tim, was screaming right in my face. And something at that moment triggered, something snapped. And I was like, I am going to play in this band. I want to be a part of that. And Kyle and I got together, and we were doing some side project, kind of just, like I said, hanging out, just making music with buddies for fun. And eventually that turned into me being in that band. And that set the path. From that moment is when we moved to LA. We went to Musicians Institute. You know, we started Synapse. I was playing in every other band I could, doing whatever I could with anybody I could. I learned how to scream because of you. And that fostered this career. I mean, I would not be doing what I do if I hadn't met you. Like, that is hand to God. I tell that to everybody who ever asks. That Sean McPherson taught me how to scream. And then Melissa Cross.
Taking that credit.
Yeah, all him, for sure. And then Melissa Cross, through her DVDs, taught me more technique later that saved my career so I didn't blow my throat out. But it was that moment in Aurora, watching my buddies on the stage, and I was like, I totally missed that. And now I found a way to meld the two, and I still get to study Kung Fu when I'm off the road, and I get to go on the road and play music.
This is my goal in life, and it kind of relates to the last thing you just said. I mean, what's the difference between happiness and success, and is one more important than the other, and which one drove you in the past and which one drives you now, if it's different?
I think they're mutually exclusive. I think there has to be a degree of success. You have to have your basic needs met. You have to eat, right? You have to have a place to sleep, a place to rest. You have to have some kind of connection with other people. But success if you're basing that on, is it money? For me, I just need enough, right? At least right now. That's what I say now. So maybe in 5 years, you know, if I'm using gold leaf toilet paper or something, you can call me out on my bullshit or whatever.
Well, I'll just pick up a roll of toilet paper. I won't call you out on anything. Can I get some TP, Aaron?
Yeah, man, here you go. But the success rate it's not just monetary. Like we talked before we started recording, like I get emails every day of people thanking me for the music we make and for the lyrics I write and for the work we put in. That, to me, is a degree of success, without question, you know? But that breeds directly into happiness because it's what I set out to do. They say if you can affect one person's life, then you succeeded. You like in a positive way? Well, I know I've done more than one. So my success and my happiness, again, mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand. So that kind of thing, that's happiness, man.
What would have been in your 5-disc CD changer in the 90s, and how has that enveloped into your current playlist?
I like that this is a reoccurring theme, the 5-disc changer.
I mentioned it before. What can I say? I got one in my living room.
Would have been Mudvayne, probably Typo Negative, Tool, Pantera. Honestly, probably either like some sort of Dr. Dre or Snoop Dogg or some Paul Oakenfold or like Paul Van Dyke or BT. I always had to have the electronic stuff in there too.
Sure. Something needs to be eclectic in there.
Yeah. Man, I listened to like Counting Crows back in the day too. You know, like I said, I mentioned the Pumpkins. I was a huge fan of them. We were talking even on the drive over here. You go through these phases where you find a band, and it, like I remember when I discovered, well, not when I discovered, but when Obsolete by Fear Factory came out. I listened to that record for probably 8 months straight, and I didn't listen to anything else. It's all I listened to. And I remember in that time, Chaosphere by Meshuggah came out, and I was too young to understand it, and I put Chaosphere in, and Meshuggah ended up being one of my favorite bands. But I put it in, and I was like, these guys are stupid. They have no idea what they're doing. It was just truly that they were musically way beyond my capacity to grasp.
Sure.
And I took it out, and I put Fear Factory back in, because it was more palatable to me. That trend has not changed. So when I find something, I listen to it to death. That's evolved now. Like it's the Contortionist. It's one of my favorite bands. They're phenomenal. Catatonia. You know, Opeth was another one that comes and goes over the years. One of my favorite bands. And you know, because you've known me for a long time, I don't see well. So when I go to a show, I'm not really concerned with like, I don't want to get close. Because even when I'm close, unless I'm like in the photo pit or on side stage, I can't really see what's happening anyway. So I try to stand in like line of fire or front of house and just hear it. I want to hear what they're doing live, you know.
Compare your aspirations as a young musician to what you experience now as a professional touring musician. You know, the dream is now reality. How different is it compared to how you envisioned it as a youth?
I think as a kid, you think it's more glamorous than it is. Maybe I did.
Of course.
I would say that's probably the biggest difference in how I thought it would be to how it is. I thought it would be more glamorous. I think I always knew it would be work because when you play your first show and you're schlepping your gear through rain or snow or whatever and doing what you have to do to make it there and you go into rehearsals despite the fact that you have school and work and you try to balance, you know, girlfriends at the time when you're a kid, you know, none of that changes. Whether you're balancing a marriage and a home, and then you have to deal with the amount of members in the band, and then the crew that goes with it, and then the team beyond that. Like, it's a lot of relationships, and it gets complicated. It's not a bad thing, it's just what it is. But I thought it would be more glamorous, I guess. And it's not, and that's all right. But one of the things that Kyle always says to me, and I say back to him, when we get in our funks, you know, I think anybody does in anything, but especially being gone from home for so long and just the travel and whatever comes with this lifestyle. He'll say to me if I'm having a bummer day, he's like, what would the 15-year-old you say to you now? And my response is usually something to the effect, he'd tell me to shut the fuck up and be happy I'm here.
When did you first start singing and what inspired that?
My mom sings like jazz, big band, opera, and so she was singing, you know, she sang in church all the time, and she was always singing like the big band, kind of like Frank Sinatra kind of stuff when I was growing up, so I'd always hear her, and I'd sing along with her, and then she knew that I had an ear and I could keep pitch, And so she would take me and I'd sing at church with her. Then I got in choirs when I was, pretty young.
Now, was this like, oh, I got to go to church, or was this like, I'm going to church to sing?
Yeah, I was stoked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a little kid, I loved it.
Did you take lessons and pursue music theory, or do you play by ear and just start jamming,
Both. So I did, when I started piano, because my eyes are pretty shoddy, and especially when I was young, they were way worse. Reading music was hard, to say the least. So there's a method called Suzuki, which is basically an ear training method that teaches you theory without having the visual requirement to read music. Now, I learned how to read music, and I still can, but I can't, I'm not a sight read guy. You can't put a piece of music in front of me, and I can just watch it and play it. I can't do that. Just visually, the synapses don't fire properly enough to make me proficient in that. But, so what I would do is I would sit and I would take a piece of music and I would memorize measure by measure, hand by hand, and I'd put them together, and then I would have a piece, and I'd put the music away. And then, so it got difficult, going to college and having to do the reading courses, because I would go home and memorize it, right? Because I couldn't actually read it, play it, but then they do the one part of the test where it's like, all right, sight read this, and I'd fail every time.
You're like, you can't even play your instrument while you're doing
No,
this.
it's impossible. And there was no compensation for that, so I had issues with that, with the power structures that be, but that also is part of my personality anyway, so.
When you're getting into, let's say you're inspired to work on something, are you thinking man, I have this great, A Mixolydian scale in my head and I want to sing it like this, or are you not thinking that way, or do you just have something in your head, you don't even understand what scale or time signature it adapts to, and you just lay that down, and is there terminology communication with you and the band like that?
There is, for sure. The terminology is there, I have that. But I think when I'm writing something, it really comes more like the way you first said it. This is the idea, this is what I hear in my head. And then I'll go back, I think, and kind of retrofit it and figure out the theory so that I can explain it later. Because I do a lot of stuff where we transcribe from, the record stuff to piano for acoustic. And my theory over the years has really helped me kind of be able to adapt that quickly. I don't have to think about it. Having those tools in my toolbox is awesome.
Sure.
But it's not, I wouldn't say that I sit down and say, all right, I'm going to write a riff in, like you said, A, Mixolydian, I'm going to write a riff in that. I don't really think that way.
Right.
But I have the terminology to know that when I hear something, I can say, that's Dorian, or that, because that's one of my favorites as a guitar player. I just know I like the way that scale sounds. But I wouldn't say that I come at it from the terminology first. That's kind of an after the fact.
Sure. One of my favorite songs is the last song on Memento. I don't know the name of it, but you guys have this killer talent of making 6/8 or 3/4 feel amazing to me.
Is that Brought to Light, I think?
Correct. Yeah, Brought to Light. Is someone hey, I got this 6/8 feel, or is someone just kind of humming something out that turns out to be 6/8?
Again, it's a little of both. I remember writing that song in particular, and Brian for sure went from verse 1 to verse 2. The drum beats are totally different. He does kind of this 4/3 polyrhythm in the first verse, which to me, I remember recording vocals and guitars to it, it was just so bizarre. And one day it just clicked. For whatever reason, one day I was like, oh, I get what you did there. I get your groove. Cool. That's really awesome, dude. But for a few weeks, I was fighting him on it. Dude, what are you doing? The second half goes into more of a straight 6/8 feel. But that was really him kind of nerding out and doing his part to nerd out in the music, and that becomes fun.
It's very digestible for odd meter, which is
Yeah.
why I'm liking it. You already kind of preempted this, but did your parents or guardian support you wanting to become a musician or a rock star? And do you think that was a deciding factor on where you are right now?
100%. Absolutely.
Now, were they this is your hobby or this is productive, or were they you should be a musician?
It was my mom, for sure, that supported it. I don't want to say pushed it, because that sounds like it was forced, but she saw that I had an interest. One of the stories that she tells me, and I don't remember this, I was a little kid, 2 or 3. And we were driving in the car, and I was in my car seat, and she was playing her contemporary Christian rock radio station or whatever. That's what I was raised on. And from what I'm told, I started doing harmonies in the back seat, to the melody. It's a song I'd learned and I heard before. And so I started doing harmonies to it. And my mom turned around, being, you know, trained musically. And she goes, keep doing that. You're doing harmonies. And as a 2 or 3-year-old, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I started singing the melody. And she's like, all right, never mind. And she'd turn around and ignore me. And then I'd start harmonizing again. And I've noticed that's been a thing that I've done my whole life. Like when I get I used to do this with Tool records all the time. Like I would learn the record and then I would write my own harmonies for it because Maynard was the only one singing. You know? So if you listen to the music we do now, I mean, I'm just saturating with harmonies. It's like my favorite thing to do. Nonetheless, I digress. You know, that and then coupled with my love for piano, she just knew that I loved it. It was the thing that I looked forward to every week. And there was a point where my folks got divorced when I was like 5, and you know, we became a single parent home and we didn't have a lot of money. And she ran out of money for my piano lessons and I didn't take them for like a year. And I still remember very vividly one Christmas. I don't want to say it was the only present I got because she'll probably tell me that's not true. But I remember in specific this Christmas I got an envelope under the tree. And it was just a note saying that I could start piano lessons again. And I was ecstatic, I was overjoyed, because that's what I loved as a kid. I'm legally blind, I suck at sports. You know, all the kids I mean, I'd play with the kids, but I sucked.
Sure.
You know, that was never going to be my path. I was never going to be a basketball player. You know what I mean? Never. This is never going to happen. You know, when I reached about 14 or 15, I decided I really didn't want to play piano exclusively anymore. I didn't want to take lessons for that. I'd had it for, you know, 12 years, and I was really into guitar at the time, so I started taking guitar lessons, and she was totally supportive of that, and I took them. I taught myself more or less for the first couple of years, because I had the basis of theory from playing classical piano, that I could translate it and kind of ear train and figure it out. And then I wanted to go, you know, train with somebody who really knew what they were doing, and I got to do that, and eventually that led me to go to college for it, you know. She was always supportive of it, and still is to this day.
What would you say briefly to someone who does not have the encouragement that you had from their parental figure?
Man, one, that sucks, because I don't know, you know, I had plenty of moments of doubt in my path, you know, and always having her kind of being encouraging of whatever I did was important. But I think ultimately it has to come from you. Like, you have to be the one that wants to do it. I look at, I think an example would be somebody who is in sports, right? And maybe one of their parents or their uncle or whoever is just like, you need to do this, you need to be a sports star. And then they end up hating it. You know, maybe they're talented at it, but the way they're grilled, the way they're pushed into it makes them resent the action of even being involved. Like, that's not healthy either. I think if you really, really want it, defy the odds, man. You know, my dad, God bless him, man. He's been gone for a long time. Didn't get it, didn't understand my love for music. And he never discouraged me, but he would have much preferred me to read and study stuff and become more educated and take that path in life, you know. I kind of ignored him at the time because my passion was there and I let that drive me. I think if you really, really, really want to do it, you have to rely on your own passion, that thing to push you into doing it and into pursuing it.
What encouraged you most as a young musician to stay on a productive path?
Trial and error. I wasn't always on a productive path, you know. I certainly made mistakes along the way. But I think it does come back to the passion of it. At the end of the day, no matter what choices I've made along the road of life, music always, I know it sounds so cliche coming out of my face hole, but music always brought me back, man. You know, music was always the foundation. And really, if I'm in a bad place or I'm depressed or I'm angry or something, like listening to music or picking up a guitar or sitting down at a piano helps with that. And I think it was its own magnet to draw me back and to bring me back into a positive space.
When you get a buzz from music, it's, you know, you don't have to put something in your body for the buzz. So, you know, it's free depending on how you perceive what you're hearing. What was the brand model of your first instrument or gear, and what genre of music were you into at the time?
Do I have to tell this story? All right, now.
Yeah.
So my first guitar was a vintage Sunburst Squire Strat.
Vintage Squire.
No, there's the vintage Sunburst. Was the color.
Thank you for correcting me. Gotcha.
Fender Squire Strat.
Gotcha.
That we got from our local music store.
Damn straight.
And I had a little Marshall, like one of these, but like the 110 combo.
Sure.
That I blew up for sure at some point.
Probably plugging a microphone and screaming into it.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. You know, probably borrowing my buddy's grunge pedal. You remember those? Yeah, the DOD.
Oh,
yeah, dude. Department of Defense grunge pedals, dude.
Dude, that grunge pedal was a thrash pedal, man.
Yeah,
it was more than grunge. It was better than the thrash zone.
Yes,
or
it
whatever,
was.
dude.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So those were, and then my first half stack was a crate. I think it's GH100, like the solid state. You know what I'm talking about?
Awesome, typical
The little,
first
the
gear,
little,
you
the
know?
little tiny head with the 410 cabinet. And I learned everything on that thing. I had that amp until I was probably almost 20. Yeah, and then my second guitar was an Epiphone Les Paul, but it was a custom shop. I still have it. It was this beautiful silver burst, and it came with 2 dime-buckers in it. And that thing just screams. I still have that guitar. I still love it.
Sure. Is it heavy as hell or what?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's probably got some good tone for recording still.
That's why I got shoulder problems, because of that bad boy.
Exactly. That's why I played Parker Fly.
I know, and I always wanted one. When I met you, I'm like, not only do you scream, you have awesome dreadlocks, but you play Parkers. Oh, I love this guy. I got to get to know him. And here we are.
And here we are.
Yeah,
Fuck
man.
yeah. As a touring vocalist, is all you need is a microphone for gear, or do you have a rack of effects or something that gives you your Gemini sound?
Nope, just a mic. I let whoever's doing front of house, I say use delays as much as you want. I love the delay effect, especially on screams and stuff, or really long solid notes, to have that reverbs. But there's no, like, I don't use like a Sans amp or anything like that live. Sometimes in the studio we will, because it gives a cool effect for screaming
Well,
stuff.
you guys definitely have a lot of production processing
Yeah.
post.
But when it
live-
comes to live, I have a wireless Sennheiser through our rack that runs to front of house, and then front of house gets whatever they want.
Sure, and your boys sing a lot of backing vocals, so are you singing to backing tracks, or are your guys singing
They're
backing
singing.
tracks?
They're singing. There's definitely spots where we have kind of affected vocals that were on the record. Like, for example, in Anonymous on this record, Chuck, one of our guitar players, was building a session for live. And he came to me, he's like, dude, there's like 70 vocal tracks. What am I supposed to sing? Sorry, dude. And of course, we pick and choose or whatever. So there's, you just stack these harmonies, like I was saying earlier. I love stacking harmonies, and I love having these big choir, because that's what I came up in, man. I sang alto in a choir where there was first soprano, second soprano, alto, baritone, and bass. And that was like, like 10 years old doing that. So I had to fit into a 5-part harmony. So when I write vocals for this kind of stuff, I enjoy that. That's just like my kind of self-indulgent moment to do that. So we have some of those sprinkled in tracks, but I would say the vast majority of anything we do is live.
Right. Was Memento like the next chapter from Lux, or was Memento just continuing on that path because there's so much of that path to write about and deliver? Did a step happen from a lyric standpoint, message standpoint?
In a sense, intentionally, yeah. I mean, I think Lux really deals with kind of the beginning phases of life and the coming of age and me being a teenager, and like the song Basement. I lived in the basement. I just always did, because it was dark and I don't like light. Right, so that song came out of that era of my existence, and Memento was really the story of where I'm at now, or where I've been since Lux, really. I don't really touch on any childhood issues, really, in this record. I'm really dealing with present day, or up to present day. And then with the intention of the third record dealing with transformation and death and moving on and the cycle continuing itself. So there's definitely an intention there.
So you're going to have to find something to write about on that fourth record then, huh?
I don't think that'll be a problem.
I don't think so either.
The tricycle, then the bicycle. Maybe we'll have a biped the next time.
The workflow for recording Memento, I mean, you guys laying down scratch tracks and building the song as you're making the album, or do you guys have the album totally complete on your, home Pro Tools rig before you go in and record it? What's the workflow?
It started with the second half of that, what you just said. Like, we had a home Pro Tools setup, And we kind of just laid everything out as best we could. And I would lay vocals, we'd have guitars and bass and everything. Not so much synth, maybe a little bit. And then we'd take that, send it to Kane and Kevin. And then when we got to Vegas, then we would sit down and analyze everything we'd done. And then everybody would make notes. And after, you know, even at that point, we'd been living with it for a couple months, so maybe we had edits to make. Or certainly Kane and Kevin would. And then we'd take those piece by piece and we'd re-record everything, you know, in the pro studio.
You're basically showing up with scratch tracks that represent your song, and as you go into the studio, it might get a little reproduced and reworked because you're revisiting again, but 100% of everything's getting re-recorded in a new atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet. Analog drums, man.
Yeah.
You guys got, are analog drum sounds surviving to your final mix, or are they all just completely wiped out by the time you're mixing your record?
No, they're definitely still there.
Sweet.
There's, you know, certainly some sound replacement, I think. You know,
Sure.
we take samples of everything or whatever, and if you have one hit that's like kind of off, it's not worth going and re-recording the whole song, so you
Of course.
plop it, you know how it is. But definitely, especially for the dynamic stuff, like Brian does a lot of tom work and a lot of build stuff, you know, and all that stuff has to be live, because you can just tell it's not, you know.
Dude, Brian's fucking amazing. He's always what I always compliment you on your drummer. Every time I see you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you do. Actually, now that I think
I
about
do.
it, hey.
I'm like, hey, Aaron, how's Brian?
Yeah,
I barely know the guy, but I want to know about him. Come on.
I love that. He's absolutely, you know, a driving force behind what we do, and he's gone out of his way to learn Pro Tools so we could do this record the way we did it, where we came into the studio prepared. You know, that's why we were able to do a record. It took us 16 weeks to do Lux. We did Memento in 7.
You guys are getting used to your own workflow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we came in as prepared as possible, and like there wasn't any, you know, real time spent on like, well, I don't know if I can play that part. I figured that out before I got there.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Do your work ahead of time. Make everybody's life easier.
You know, when I watch Gemini live, I've seen you a few times. It's as much as the front man should be, you know, the spotlight guy. Brian, though stationary in his seat, man, he draws a lot of attention to himself, and I think he's a great entertainer, regardless of great musicianship. Like, he keeps me into the show.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Because there's times, you know, you've known me a long time, and I have that timid part of my personality, even though I am the front man. But it gets the better of me at times, and I think I'm coming more into my own as an entertainer in that sense. I'm getting more confidence, but I love the fact that he's doing what he does.
Sure.
Because I love watching him, you know.
Well, you can take a knee now and then and have a sip of water.
And he's still,
and,
I look back and he's still...
People have something to watch while you're taking a knee. You know?
Yep.
Gemini has some sequences that play behind the core instruments of the band, plus there's some like electronic sounding interludes on your album. What influences making this a part of Gemini? Who's coming up with these parts? What's the general workflow?
It serves two purposes. On the record is to kind of just break up the song process and try to create, I guess, some kind of vibe for the flow of the record. As far as writing them, I know there's one that we use, it's right before Remember We Die. We use that in the live set. That was actually me sitting on my piano at night at like, 3 in the morning or something, and I recorded it on my iPhone. And I was sitting in the studio with Kane one day, and we were kind of done with whatever we were supposed to be doing that day, and we had some time before everybody came back, and I was like, hey, do you want to lay this down just on piano? And we did, and then we kind of started taking that MIDI information and turning it into different instrumentation, and then it came into what it was now. That was a very organic process, and then there's the one where AP is kind of speaking over the top of it, and that was, we wanted to have one organic one and one like really electronic one. Again, with the duality theme that this whole band is kind of based off of. And that was an idea that Kane came to the table with, and we just developed a little bit.
The voices on the tracks, the interlude in between songs where it's this lower, voice has been dropped an octave or two.
Not even.
Not even?
Nah, it's just AP talking.
Oh man, he's like a secret weapon of some sort.
He just gets that low, like Peter Steele voice, even though he weighs like 90 pounds or whatever. But that's just him talking.
It says something about him. It's kind of, I'm not going to be able to look at him the same next time to see him like this close and be like,
You did that? He's like, I hate my voice. Like, you sound awesome, dude. You sound sinister.
Yeah. Well, you should be doing voiceovers for, whatever, world is ending movie that's coming out.
Right?
Yeah.
Side gig.
If you could go back in time and give advice to yourself as a young musician, what advice would you give to make your music career endeavor more productive or rewarding?
Certainly don't be as scared as I was. Don't be afraid.
Confidence.
Take risks. I think a lot, and not just in my music, but in my life in general. Like, I've been a fearful person. Keep yourself level and don't be scared.
In this day and age of the music industry, what is the most effective single action a fan can do to support Gemini or their favorite band? Is it purchasing music? Is it buying tickets? Or maybe promoting you to others? What is the most beneficial thing that will help your career continue?
Spreading the word for sure.
Yeah.
Spreading the word, but then that couples with buy the records.
Sure.
Don't steal them.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But really those two go hand in hand.
Sure.
The more people that know and the more people that support, that's what
Right.
makes the business grow.
So spread the word first.
And don't steal our shit.
What do or would you say to a young aspiring musician that asks you for advice, for inspiration?
Train. Like, train your craft. Become good at what you do. Above all else, this is a trade, right? Music is an art. And there has to be skill behind it. Like, get good at what you do and work hard.
What would you say to, not a musician, but a Gemini Syndrome fan that is relating to you because of your lyrics and backstory? How would you encourage them to continue in life?
Embrace what comes your way. As fucked up as it might be, as hard as it might be, embrace it, because that's your path, that's your experience. I've been through things in my life that weren't easy, to say the least. And, it's that cliche of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but that's really true. Those things forge you like a sword through fire. It gets sharp and hardened through hammering in flame. And life is a test a lot of the time. And there's not to say that there's not beauty and peace and ecstasy involved in it. But a lot of the times you don't get there without a fight. And I think you have to be expectant of those things, of those kind of experiences in life, that they're gonna be tough, they're gonna be trying. And in life or in this industry or anything, I think it's a last man standing kind of clause. I think the people who give up are the ones who lose. And the people who don't give up are the ones that stay the course, and they get stronger because of their tenacity.
I'm going to squeeze one more in, only because this was asked to me the other day as I gloat about you and your music. What is up with the positive or spiritual vibe of Gemini? Is this a hoax? Is this a mask for marketing? Or is this who you are? I mean, I know the answer to this, but
Yeah, I know
explain to me what's up with this peacefulness in your genre of music,
I came from a place of depression, anxiety, anger, rage. I grew up like that, and I've lived that. And again, going to the last question, forged through fire, Because of those experiences, because of going through that and coming out on the other side, like, anything I write, man, is absolutely 100% from here and from here, and from my personal experience, in some way or another. And, I grew up on Pantera and Type O Negative, man, and I love Phil Anselmo and Peter Steele, but those are some of the most angry and depressing motherfuckers I ever listened to. I don't want to be responsible for another generation hearing that. So really, how can I say this bluntly? At this point, when I write lyrics like that, it ain't about anybody else but me. It's the most selfish thing I could do. Because I want to hear that. I want to be uplifted. I don't want to be fucking depressed anymore. I don't want to be sad anymore. I don't want to be angry anymore. I don't like living like that. It sucks.
You inspire me with your music.
Good.
You do, man. And thank you for the interview today, man.
Fuck yeah, brother. Of course.
Say bye to your fans.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course.